Beauty has a price, but sometimes that price is far greater than you ever imagined. Aisha was the most admired woman in her town. Her beauty was the stuff of legends. But it wasn't her perfect skin or her dazzling smile that set her apart. It was her hair. Long, silky, and black as midnight, her hair was like a crown, admired by her husband, her friends, and her 450,000 followers on social media. People begged her to share her secrets. They followed her hair growth tips religiously, hoping to achieve even a fraction of her beauty. And to the world, Aisha seemed perfect, living in a mansion with her rich, doting husband, Alhaji Musa. But Aisha had a secret. Every strand of her beautiful hair was a lie. Every night, once her husband and the household staff were asleep, Aisha would quietly sneak out of her mansion. She'd wear a simple black hijab, an abaya, the kind that would let her blend into the night and drive her modest car into the poorer neighborhoods of Kano. Here, among the dusty streets and dimly lit alleys, she conducted her business. Aisha would approach beggars and homeless women, offering them money in exchange for their hair. 3,000 naira for your hair, she'd say, holding up a bundle of cash. For these women, 3,000 was more than they made in a week, and they were often quick to agree. With a pair of scissors, Aisha would carefully cut their hair, wrap it in a cloth, and take it home. Over the next few days, she would clean and process the hair, turning it into wigs that looked so real, no one ever suspected they weren't hers. Her husband, Alhaji Musa, adored her hair. He'd often run his fingers through it, praising her for her beauty. "Your hair is like a treasure, Aisha. It's part of what makes you special," he'd say, not knowing that her treasure came from the heads of strangers. One humid night, Aisha went out as usual, her scissors and cash tucked into her bag. She parked her car near a busy intersection where beggars often gathered. She needed fresh hair for a new set of wigs. Her social media followers were eagerly waiting for her next hair growth update. As she scanned the street, her eyes landed on a mother and her young daughter sitting on a mat. The mother's hair was short and untidy, but the girl's hair took Aisha's breath away. It was long, black, and glossy, exactly the kind of hair she needed. Aisha approached them with a smile. "Good evening," she said in Hausa. The mother looked up warily. "Good evening, madam," she replied. "I want to buy your daughter's hair," Aisha said, holding up 3,000 naira. "I'll pay you for it." The mother's expression hardened. "Her hair is not for sale," she said firmly. Aisha was taken aback. Most people were eager to sell their hair for money. "I'll pay you 10,000, she offered. The mother shook her head. "This hair is sacred. If it is cut, my daughter will fall ill." Aisha didn't believe in such superstitions. To her, it was just hair. She increased her offer to 50,000 naira, then 100,000, and finally 150,000. At this point, the mother hesitated. The amount was too much to ignore. With tears in her eyes, she nodded. "Please be careful with it," she whispered. Aisha smiled in triumph. She took out her scissors and began cutting the girl's hair, but something felt off. The scissors seemed to struggle against the strands, as though the hair didn't want to be cut. It took all of Aisha's strength to finish the job. When she was done, she wrapped the hair in a cloth and hurried back to her car. She didn't notice the way the little girl stared at her, tears streaming down her face. At home, Aisha worked on the hair as usual, washing it and preparing it to be made into a wig. But as she cleaned the strands, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She looked around her room, but no one was there. By the next morning, the wig was ready. It was the most beautiful one she had ever made, thick, shiny, and perfectly black. Aisha was thrilled. She posted a picture of herself wearing the wig on Instagram, and the response was immediate. Thousands of likes and comments poured in. "Hair goals! Queen, you're so beautiful." Her followers increased overnight, and Aisha was more famous than ever. But that was when the problems began. Back in the village where the mother and daughter lived, the little girl fell ill. At first, it seemed like a simple fever, but it quickly worsened. She became pale and weak, unable to eat or drink. "Mama, I keep dreaming of a shadow," the girl whispered one night. "It's chasing me. It wants to hurt me." Her mother was terrified. She knew this wasn't a normal illness. The hair had been a gift from the river goddess, a powerful spirit they worshipped in their village. Cutting it had angered the goddess, and now her daughter was paying the price. Meanwhile, Aisha's life was unraveling. The wig, which had brought her so much fame, began behaving strangely. No matter where she kept it, it would move on its own. She'd leave it in her wardrobe, only to find it on the kitchen table the next morning. At night, she heard whispers coming from the room where she stored her wigs. Sometimes, she'd wake up to find the wig lying next to her on the bed, as though it had moved there by itself. Her husband, Alhaji Musa, began experiencing financial troubles. His once thriving businesses were failing, and he couldn't understand why. "It's like we're cursed," he told Aisha one evening. Aisha woke up that night to a strange sensation, as if someone was running fingers through her hair. She shot up, her heart pounding, and turned on the bedside lamp. Her husband, Alhaji Musa, was fast asleep beside her, snoring softly. She reached for her hair, and to her horror, she realized she wasn't wearing the wig. "Where is it?" she muttered, looking around the room. Her heart raced as she spotted the wig lying on the floor, near the door. She knew she had left it on her vanity table the night before. Shaking off her unease, she picked up the wig and placed it back on the stand. "It's just my imagination," she whispered to herself. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the chill creeping up her spine. The next morning, Aisha's husband approached her with a concerned look on his face. "Aisha, something is wrong," he said. "What do you mean?" she asked, feigning innocence. "My biggest client just pulled out of a multi-million naira deal, and this is the third one this week. It's like everything I touch is falling apart," Musa said, rubbing his temples. Aisha tried to comfort him, but she couldn't help feeling a growing sense of dread. It was as if the bad luck was spreading from her to everyone around her. In the small village where the mother and daughter lived, the little girl's condition worsened. Her once bright eyes grew dull, and she could barely speak. Every night, she had the same nightmare, a shadowy figure chasing her through a dark forest, its glowing red eyes filled with malice. "Mama, it's going to take me," the girl whispered weakly one night. "Shh, my child," her mother said, tears streaming down her face. "You will be fine. I will pray to the river goddess for help." But the mother knew in her heart that the river goddess was angry. Cutting her daughter's hair had broken a sacred bond, and now the goddess wanted revenge. A week later, the little girl passed away. The entire village mourned her death, but her mother couldn't shake the guilt. She had sold her daughter's sacred hair for money, and now her child was gone. Meanwhile, Aisha's fame continued to grow. The hair made from the little girl's hair became her most popular post on social media, and she gained tens of thousands of new followers. Brands began reaching out to her for sponsorship deals, and she was featured in magazines as one of Nigeria's top beauty influencers. But her personal life was falling apart. Her husband's business continued to collapse, and he grew distant and irritable. Their once lavish lifestyle was crumbling before their eyes. One evening, Musa confronted Aisha in their living room. "Something is wrong with this house," he said. "I don't know what it is, but ever since you started with these hair care, things have been strange." Aisha laughed nervously. "You're imagining things," she said. "No, I'm not," Musa insisted. "The other night I heard whispers coming from your hair care room, and yesterday I saw something move in there." Aisha's stomach churned. She tried to dismiss his concerns, but she knew he was right. The wigs had taken on a life of their own, and she could no longer control them. That night, Aisha decided to confront her fears. She walked into the room where she stored her wigs and turned on the light. The room felt colder than usual, and the air was heavy with an unexplainable tension. She approached the wig made from the little girl's hair and stared at it. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. The room seemed to grow darker, and Aisha heard a faint, childlike giggle. She spun around, but no one was there. The giggle turned into a whisper, then a low, menacing growl. Terrified, Aisha ran out of the room and locked the door behind her, but the whispers followed her, growing louder and more insistent. "You can't run," they seemed to say. "You will pay for what you've done." A few days later, Musa stumbled upon the room while Aisha was out. Curious, he unlocked the door and stepped inside. What he saw left him speechless. Dozens of wigs were arranged neatly on stands, each one labeled with a name and date. The labels included details like Kano Beggar, April 2023, and Market Woman, July 2023. Musa's eyes widened in horror as he realized the truth. "She's been buying hair from people and passing it off as her own," he muttered. When Aisha returned home, Musa was waiting for her. He confronted her with the evidence, demanding an explanation. "I wanted to be successful." "You've brought shame to this family," Musa said coldly. "And worse, you've brought something evil into our home." Aisha's life spiraled out of control. Her husband left her, taking their children with him. Her social media followers turned against her when rumors of her wig-making practices leaked online. Left alone in her mansion, Aisha was tormented by the spirits of the wigs. They whispered to her day and night, accusing her of greed and deceit. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, and she felt unseen hands tugging at her hair. Desperate, Aisha tried to find the mother and daughter to undo the curse. But when she returned to the intersection where she had met them, they were gone. She searched the entire city, but it was as if they had vanished. In the end, Aisha lost everything: her wealth, her family, and her reputation. She was forced to sell her mansion and move into a tiny apartment where the hauntings continued. Through her suffering, Aisha learned a bitter truth. Greed and deception come at a price. Her obsession with fame and beauty had destroyed not only her life, but also the lives of others. This story is a reminder that the choices we make have consequences. Aisha's greed blinded her to the harm she was causing, and in the end, she paid the ultimate price. What do you think of her actions? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories.